Hello again, friends, and welcome into Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips joined by Gamecock Central columnist Scott Davis for a look at Scott's new column that's up on Gamecock Central this week. The headline is A'ja for the Ages. Scott, 4 years ago, you were on Gamecock Central on the day that A'ja Wlson was set to announce her college decision. She was the top high school basketball prospect in the country, coming out of Heathwood Hall Episcopal School in Columbia. And you were on Gamecock Central that day waiting to find out if she would choose South Carolina.
I sure was, Emerson, and was doing so nervously, which was kind of a surprise to me because I certainly wished the Gamecock women's basketball team well at that time. I wished the women's soccer team well, the women's tennis team well. I wished everybody well, but to say that I was a diehard supporter of that program would not be true. And yet when I was following A'ja Wlson's recruitment, her being a Columbia girl and the consensus number one recruit in the country, I started finding myself more and more intrigued by her as a player, and Dawn Staley had already gotten my appetite brewing for the women's basketball program in general. So I just wanted us to land her that day, and noticed that I was kind of nervous about her decision. UConn was hanging out there, and that's, for any elite recruit in women's basketball, that's always a huge hurdle to overcome. And I thought she was going to go to South Carolina, but you never know with these things. And I ended up being very excited to learn she was coming to Columbia.
Carolina won a national championship in women's basketball last year, and that's the crowning achievement for A'ja Wlson in her 4 years at South Carolina. She was the number one pick in the WNBA draft last week, going to the Las Vegas Aces. But the career achievements for A'ja Wlson really unparalleled at South Carolina and beyond. When you look at everything that she's done in her 4 years, she swept all three major Player of the Year awards this year. She's the only player to win 3 SEC Player of the Year awards, and her Gamecock teams were unbeaten at the SEC tournament in 4 years. They never lost a game. They won all 4 SEC tournaments during A'ja Wlson's time. So 3 Elite Eights, 2 Final Fours, and the national championship. And what this all means, Scott, you add it up, and women's athletics is now a permanent part of the Gamecock brand.
I think there's no question. There's no question. And it started when Dawn Staley got here. She started putting the program on the map, getting people interested. And the Gamecock fan base for the women's team is a unique fan base of its own. I mean, they're all certainly part of the larger Carolina family, but that particular fan base just are hardcore diehards. They take bus trips to follow this team and, go on the road and fill up arenas for the NCAA tournament when the Lady Gamecocks are there. And, a lot of that is due to what's been achieved these last 4 years with A'ja Wlson on that team. And it's not just, as I say in the column, the just incredible multitude of achievements and awards that she's accumulated. It's her as well, her personality, her infectious enthusiasm, obvious love for the game, the fact that she always plays hard every time out. It's not just about her undeniable talent. And that's why, really, she was the perfect foil for Dawn Staley over these last 4 years. Staley is the coach, Wlson is the player, embodying this kind of good-natured, feel-good spirit that surrounds the women's basketball program. And they are forever on the map now. And I think now women's athletics in general, as a result, at South Carolina, are very much entrenched as part of the fabric of our athletic community. The women's soccer team has been drawing 5,000 fans for their games. And so I'm really pleased to see how fans have embraced women's athletics in South Carolina. And a huge, huge part of that is because of A'ja Wlson.
Paying our respects to the great A'ja Wlson today here on Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips with Scott Davis. A'ja for the Ages is the headline of Scott's column this week. It's up on Gamecock Central right now. We hope you'll check it out. Scott, when you were watching her signing day press conference 4 years ago, the first thing you noticed that you wrote in your column this week is that she has one of those smiles that lights up the world. You see her smile and it makes you feel better.
There's no question. She just is, and I mentioned the word infectious a minute ago, and I said that in the column, and that's really what it is. She does make you feel better. There's just something about her presence. When she gives a post-game press conference, even that seems fun, and that's hard for anybody to make seem like a joy to watch. And she and the rest of the team kind of followed her lead as well these last 4 years. They just became a very happy-go-lucky group, which didn't mean that they didn't take the game seriously, because they certainly did. They could be assassins at times when they needed to be, and absolutely blow teams out of the building when necessary, and come on strong down the stretch of basketball games. So they certainly took the game seriously, but they also treated it as a game, which means that it was something to be enjoyed. Yes, there's pressure involved, but at the end of the day, isn't it fun to get out here and play basketball in front of 10,000 fans in the SEC? That's the way they always treated these games, and she was kind of the spiritual leader of that movement.
A'ja Wlson, number 1 overall pick of the WNBA draft last week, taken by the Las Vegas Aces, and she's the first Gamecock to be selected with the first pick in the WNBA draft, and the third Gamecock in any sport to be picked first in his or her sport's professional draft. Clowney went first to the Houston Texans in the NFL draft in 2014, and George Rogers taken first overall by the New Orleans Saints in the NFL draft back in 1981. So Wlson closes her college career as the most decorated women's basketball player in South Carolina history, and she has etched her name in the SEC history books as well. She's South Carolina's first 4-time All-American, 3 times a first-team All-America selection, 4 times on the All-SEC first team, and again, she is the first 3-time SEC Player of the Year in conference history, 3 times a finalist for the 3 primary National Player of the Year awards, and she swept all 3 this year: the Citizens Naismith Trophy, the Wade Trophy, and the prestigious Wooden Award. She brought all 3 of them home this year after the best statistical season of her career. She ranked in the nation's top 11 in scoring, rebounding, and block shots this year, and she won the Honda Sport Award for basketball. She won the National Player of the Year award from every major media outlet this year. So, Scott, just the second player in program history to finish with 2,000 career points and 1,000 rebounds. And the 2017 National Championship, the crowning achievement, undefeated in 4 SEC tournaments as a Gamecock. And Carolina is the only program to win 4 consecutive SEC women's basketball conference championships. A'ja Wlson holds 62 South Carolina records, and she's the career leader in points and block shots, and she ranks in the program's top 5 a total of 114 times.
It's incredible. I mean, it's almost exhausting to list all of her accolades, and as you read them, it becomes so clear, which was one of the critical points I wanted to make in this column, which is that, the A'ja Wlson era just happened, and we're just coming out of it. So I think there might be a tendency on the part of fans to take it for granted what we just seen happen here, and that happens all the time. It's not that Gamecock fans don't appreciate what she's done. It's just that it's hard to recognize the gravity of what's happening in the moment. But the point is, at the end of the day, the impact that A'ja Wlson's had at South Carolina is among the top, very, very small handful of athletes who played for South Carolina in the history of that program's athletic department. You talk about George Rogers and Jadeveon Clowney being the only 2 athletes in any sport to be taken first in their sport's respective professional draft until now. George Rogers winning the Heisman Trophy certainly compares, and Jadeveon Clowney obviously had a huge career at South Carolina, but the impact that Wlson's career had here in terms of where women's basketball at this school was before, she arrived, and certainly before Dawn Staley arrived, to where it is now, to where you're routinely drawing 11,000, 12,000 fans for women's basketball games, and doing it just about every time out, going back to the pre-A'ja Wlson era of, a couple of thousand at best fans in the stands. So the impact on the overall sport that she played at South Carolina man, you could argue that nobody in Gamecock athletic history has had that kind of impact. I mean, I know some would take issue with that, but I'd say it's at least arguable. And so I just want Gamecock fans to truly understand the magnitude of what her 4 years here meant.
In Wilson's 4 years with the Gamecocks, South Carolina was 129-16 and 57-7 in the SEC. 3 SEC regular season championships, 1 regular season second place finish, and the Gamecock women were 44-13 against nationally ranked opponents. Wilson becomes the 6th SEC player taken with the first pick of the WNBA draft and the first since Candace Parker from Tennessee back in 2008. So now 9 Gamecock women have been selected in the WNBA draft, 5 during head coach Dawn Staley's tenure. We hail the great A'ja Wlson today. Scott, you think she belongs on the Gamecock Mount Rushmore?
I don't think there can be any question. I really don't. As I was just saying, when you consider the impact on her sport itself, I mean, if you think of all the great players that she loved in Gamecock athletic history, you know, take a player in your head and ask yourself, if I subtracted him or her from the equation, how much different would the program itself look? You know, again, you could argue that her overall impact may have been greater than any other athlete in South Carolina history, man, woman, or whoever it may be. So I really do, you know, I don't know exactly where she belongs on the list, but I don't see how you could have a Gamecock Mount Rushmore without her.
Yeah, and just nothing but positive vibes coming from A'ja Wlson, good student, very involved in the community. Through works with the South Carolina Athletics Department, and just a positive impact that A'ja Wlson has had all around on the University of South Carolina and our state and on women's college basketball. So good stuff. Scott, thanks for your time today.
Always a pleasure, Emerson. Talk to you later.
All right, our pleasure. Scott Davis, our columnist here on Gamecock Central, and I'm Emerson Phillips, and this is Gamecock Central Radio. Thanks for joining us.